Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Ian. What's up?
Welcome to Wheels Up Live. Once again, we're back. I'm IND Bound,
I'm Felix.
and we're excited to join you here for another week where we have lots to talk about. And as always, we will start with our news of the
News.
week. And I guess our sort of lead off item on the news of the week is that Just Flight has announced that they will have the Fokker 70 coming.
Yes. And this
And
Fokker 100. Yes.
yes, now Felix is more up to date on the Fokker than I. I've not delved into it very much. So, what's your take?
So, uh, I think the Fokker, the kind of key thing is to just know that Just Flight, I would say, as an entity, has kind of changed or pivoted their how they're releasing their products. They're going for a more high fidelity feel than I would say they did like in their P3D days, X-Plane days. I think they're going for something that's a little bit more in depth. And I would say that my personal opinion is their texture quality is probably top of the business at this point with what they're doing. Especially if you look at the F-28, which is the little mini Fokker, if you will. Yeah, the F-28, and of course you have the F-70 and the F-100, which I don't have the F-28. Not a lot of U.S. operators had it, just not kind of my thing. So the F-70, a fair amount of U.S. operators had it, and the F-100 for sure. Like American Airlines, they flew that thing to every flyover state, middle of nowhere you've never heard of, and it'll be a good opportunity. It's got an FMS. It's got a capable. I don't know if it's. I'd have to do a little more research. I don't know if it's 3-axis, meaning like it has vertical profile as well, like VNAV or whatever. But even if it doesn't, it was a pretty prolific little airplane. And I flew around with a lot of operators, not just here in the U.S. and obviously the Dutch and a lot all over the world. So
Right.
their latest update talked about their sound recording, and of course we didn't think to put a picture of it, more so because it was just a picture of them miking up the real
Right. It was a
aircraft
picture of a microphone, basically.
of a microphone with
Right.
with the real aircraft, which isn't
Yeah.
representative of their product, but it's representative of the links that they are going personally. I read the article, and they're talking about how they're really recording the 650 Tay, which is a Rolls Royce engine that the Fokker F-70 F-100 uses, and it's they're getting the real sounds, they're getting the real switch sounds. So I think it's a really exciting development from them. So yeah.
Well, and I think it was very well received.
Yes.
I mean, it was a very well received airplane, and adding some more variants, I think, is sure to be popular. And actually, we have some Just Flight products we're going to talk about in our feature segment
Yep.
on general aviation today. Where again, I think when you look at the work that they've done on texturing
Yes.
and attention to detail and high fidelity have been well received by
Mhm.
the community. And unlike the airliner, there are plenty of people who fly Piper Arrows in the real world, and so you get a broader base of feedback, and
Yes.
it's very, very positive.
Yeah.
So one of the other bigger stories this week is the ATR, which in Microsoft Flight Simulator, which is an add-on option there for a relatively small amount of dollars. I think it was around $20. Is
Something
that
like
right?
that.
But if you had
I couldn't.
premium, it was $11 or
Yeah.
something like that. There was a discount. But again, another aircraft that people were very excited about and well received. One of the big tidbits this week is that there's a big update coming to it,
Yeah.
and you know I think it's actually nice to see that we're getting updates to some of these uh, products that are essentially MSFS exclusive.
Yeah. Yeah. I would go ahead and argue that I think you and I have talked about how I feel like Asobo's main goal with their kind of integration, which we'll talk about working title in a little bit, And some of these other developers, any builds, I think they're trying to get to a product where, especially with the Xbox realm, where you may not necessarily have to buy a lot of third party add-ons to have a good time, because not everybody is to kind of, maybe I would say, our level where we're going to have a Navigraph subscription. We're going to have several $100s, in some cases several $1,000s worth of peripherals, to kind of enhance our experience. Some people just want to hop in, they want to fly, they want to do their A to B, or they want to fly around their house, or do whatever they want to do, and they want to do that in a short amount of time. But they also appreciate that, there could be an extra level to make it feel like they're a little bit more immersed. And I kind of think that's what's going on here with these products like the ATR. Obviously, the latest iteration of the millionth A320 we have sim got pulled because it wouldn't work for Xbox, and obviously I think that's any, and that's gonna be really re-released. But anyways, as far as the ATR is concerned, these are the kind of products that show me that there's a pivot in the thinking of how we're going to kind of use the base sim now. Like, look at Microsoft 2024, like what's going to be included in that. They're going to have missions. They're going to have all this kind of stuff that we haven't been used to in several years. And as far as the base sim. So I think, things like this where, they're really cheap, right? Like that's another thing of this too. You could have a really cheap, very versatile aircraft. Obviously we know somebody who just is literally getting typed in the ATR, like as we're speaking. And,
Yep.
It's a very exciting development, and I look forward to this kind of stuff because I think it brings a lot more people into our hobby, and that obviously that's just going to lead to better products, more product representation, just in the various amounts of aircraft, right? Whereas before, you only kind of went with the safe options because there was really no market to do these kinds of aircraft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
no, I mean, I think it turns out for almost any aircraft of note, almost any aircraft with a recognizable name, there appears to be a market.
yep.
And I think there might even be a market for some aircraft that people hadn't thought of at all, because I think Asobo has identified, at least to some degree, a number of aircraft that are sort of old classic aircraft,
Yes.
or maybe less thought about aircraft, and have gone ahead and put it in the sim themselves.
Sure. Yeah,
somebody must be flying it.
I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the there's one, the La Creuserce 631, which I might have butchered that name, is this like really massive flying boat.
Yes.
They only made like 3 and they were all destroyed, or they were made 10. It was I read this book about Pan Am flying boats, and that specific aircraft was mentioned, which when I heard Asobo, I was like, this is very interesting that they're going to put this as like a local legend sort of thing in here. It's like, that's kind of cool. Maybe not high fidelity, but then again, you probably can't find documents on it. So
right.
like,
what does high fidelity mean in that case anyway?
Yeah, exactly.
There probably wasn't much to it to start with, other than, it's a big.
Now, I will tell you, if somebody comes out with a high fidelity Martin M130 or a Boeing 314, not the pilot's one, I don't really consider that high fidelity, but if they do that, like A2A or somebody, I'll throw my wallet right at it. I'm all ready for. Yeah, exactly. I'm all ready for that. Take my money, please.
Well, one other bit of news this week. But there was actually 2 other stories, but one other bit of news this week on the update front. AnyBuilds has put yet another update out for the A300.
Yes,
and I think we're all finding that they have really taken this seriously.
They have 100%. I am very surprised at what they've done with this A300. The depth level. I know a lot of people who are very, very impressed with this thing. They love it. They're hardcore simmers, or they're real world pilots, whoever. You love it. And honestly, I did the A310 for like a couple flights, but I really didn't tickle my fancy. But getting into this A300, I think it's actually really enjoyable. I think it's really easy to fly, especially if you know the Airbus philosophy of the dark cockpit, right? Like if you don't see any lights, you're good. And I think it's actually a lot easier to get into. There's some idiosyncrasies that are very like this aircraft was designed in 1978 and this specific variant 1989, and technology was a lot different back then than it is today.
Yes.
Um, but I think it's enjoyable that like you have this kind of classic meets modern, and of course they're only going to upgrade. So the Pratt and Whitneys are coming for a nominal fee. For for the cargo people who UPS, FedEx people who that's probably all they're flying with it. The Epic mod that's going to include the EFIS suite that's developed by Honeywell, the Honeywell Primus Epic. That's going to be included at some point. I know they were talking about Hoppy integrated CPDLC ACAR. So I mean,
Yeah.
you're getting into some really like higher fidelity areas with what they're talking about with this add-on.
Right. I mean, you're getting into a feature set that are found in a select group of aircraft at
Yes,
this point,
exactly.
most of which I think we would consider to be in the high fidelity
Fidelity.
category,
Yep.
whether that's something like a Phoenix or in MSFS or over something like an FS Labs.
Yes. Yeah.
Some of those kinds of features that, or well, it's different setup, but even something a little bit like the Challenger.
Yeah, and I really like their UI. I'm just going to say for the EFB, I think it's like it's really really good. I still like the FS Labs. I still think that's because it has the movie map and some of the other little niche things that it's
It
got.
has
But
a
I,
lot of good stuff in it.
dude, it really does. But the any builds is. I think this is what this gives me hope for. That A350 that they're going to come out with eventually, maybe end of this year, probably more likely next year, is going to be a well done, very detail oriented aircraft, as it should be, because the A350 is very complex. So good news to see this. Good news to see that they're actually like a lot of the things with the flight model that they talk about. They're taking the community seriously. They're listening to the community. I'm in the Discord. I know you're in. I know you're not active, but you read the
Yeah, no, I
Discord
read
and
it all the time.
you see that a lot of the threads with the flight model, they were very serious. They were like, okay, we're going to send this back, and obviously they were like, well, maybe the feedback was, that this could be tweaked, and they did that. And people I need to fly it, but people who have flown it have said, you know what, this is really good. I think we're in a good place here. So it's
Yeah.
really nice to see. And then they had that one that was like if you do the EFB to something, it sets the fuel to like 999 like
Right.
trillion or something, and the plane bunny hops. And people are like, I'm not going to update this just to try that, just to see if it did it, and then I'll update it.
Right.
So it's kind of funny that
Right.
they literally went to the nth degree in these kind of bug fixes and stuff. And I think that's a very good sign for both that aircraft and future products they're going to have down the line.
Right, and I think particularly for the A350, where I expect that the list of fixes will probably end up being long because it's going to be a real challenge, and some of it just may not come about until users start doing the crazy things that users
edge
do.
case, right? It's really the edge case users that a lot of the bugs are going to be found. And honestly, if you're an add-on maker, that's really where you want to be. If you're in a point where only edge case users are the people that are commenting on bugs and stuff like that, that's good.
Well, it's interesting because I think one of the things that we rightly could have had a concern about here with the A300 coming to MSFS is that for the X-Plane market, I think there is a feeling amongst X-Plane users that any builds did not treat them right.
Yep.
Okay, they ported it to X-Plane 12, but essentially walked away from it. And they'll just walk away from it here in MSFS. And I think already we're seeing that they've been on this in a serious way, and as you say, also trying to step it up. And I think that like a lot of other developers, maybe any builds jump ship first, but we've just seen a lot of developers who have decided that they're going to put their resources into MSFS, and that's that.
I mean, we talked about this with one of our guests, Professor Crash, I think, and at the end of the day, these people are they got to pay bills. dude, at the end of the day, this is about money. Like we're passionate people, and this is a hobby for us, right?
Sure.
And so we think of it from the lens of like, yeah, man, this is awesome. But you've got to look at it like they've got to keep light bills on. This is for some of them. This is income. This is people. Literally, this is jobs for people. And
Oh
like
yeah.
when PMDG says, "Hey, we're leaving," it's not because like, "Oh, we hate you." It's because, well, this is how I'm going to pay my bills. And we can argue that maybe it's how we're paying for Falcon bills too. But
Whatever bills they are.
yeah, whatever bills
that
they are, they're
Well, let's
and,
put it this way: the P3D isn't going to fuel the P3D sales aren't going to fuel the Falcon.
no, they aren't.
So there you go.
And that's just and that's the reality is like sometimes as a hobbyist we do have to step back and kind of dispassionately and logically look at it like it's because I've seen this a lot too with the entitlement of people like when is this update coming out, when is this to
Right.
and we both have a product right now that you don't want right now. you just don't want it. You're not going to want, you're going to be mad if they release it tomorrow. You would be mad if they release it tomorrow.
Right.
And I'm not trying to throw shade on them, which is why I'm not talking about who they specifically are.
But we all know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Or some of us do. But my only point there being, but on the flip side of that, I think we are seeing some pretty good receptions for some all early access. I think the Learjet's getting a good reaction.
Yes, they are.
You can compare that to the E-Jets, which got a reaction on the order of "please go away and never come back." So that's, but they're still hanging in there.
I don't know why VNav is an anathema to like every Embraer developer.
Right? Don't. Well, probably because it doesn't. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't work that well. But anyway, I don't know the answer to that one. But actually, you bring me to a point though that we're talking. What sort of brings us to our feature as well, which is that we have seen a lot of very high fidelity planes coming in a little bit different market, and that is the general aviation market, or as I put here, the general aviation explosion.
Hopefully the NTSB is not watching. We are not talking about any
there's
real.
No literal explosion. An explosion of products and developers and high fidelity add-ons, particularly in Microsoft Flight Simulator. But there's been some, of course, for X-Plane 12 as well that are coming along. Or getting there or are out. I'm not focusing here really on X-Plane 11 because, well, there's no development going on really for it. So, and I think I personally enjoy flying some general aviation. I have spent some time working on that in a structured way.
Yes, I remember to your consternation at times.
Yeah, 2 years. Well, so just a quick background for those who don't know. VATSIM has these ratings that you can get, and one of them's P1, which is sort of like a private pilot ID, and you're supposed to VFR yourself around, which almost nobody does on VATSIM. But kindly, one of the virtual airline I belong to does this training program so you can learn how to do it. My airmanship was meh, and so I did it. It took 2 years. Due to everyone's schedules, and those people who work with me were kindly volunteering their time, but I did it. But I spent a lot of time in the Cessna 172, the default one in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and early on, the default one in X-Plane. And so now I've been GAing around a bit, and I know Felix enjoys some GA pieces, particularly on the jet side, turboprop side, and what we've seen, really looking at it, it's really quite incredible what's out there.
I'm actually going to consider myself a person who I've been hobbying this hobby for better part of 2 decades, right? I never got into GA, and I think this is kind of the point we're going to talk about until Microsoft Flight Simulator. Personally, I just saw no fun or no use or no utility in it. So, yeah.
And so, but what's changed? But that brings up the question. Well, what's changed your mind, right? And I think we all kind of know what it is.
Yeah.
But you've experienced that transition or a piqued interest in flying GA. What's done it for you?
I think obviously the big thing is the look, right? So like the look of the sim. I think people have underestimated because we've dealt with it for so long. Sims haven't really looked great. until Microsoft Flight Simulator. And you could argue X-Plane Auto Ortho is a suitable alternative if you're willing to put in the time, because the old Auto Ortho was a pain in the absolute butt to try to set up.
Oh yeah.
In X-Plane, yeah, it's extremely time intensive. But now you have a sim where you flick a button and you have photogrammetry and I did it, and I don't know if you've done it, but I know almost everybody who started the sim when it first came out did it. They flew over their house and like the streets and roads and everything, and it's all pretty much there. Unless you live in something that's like, I don't know, a month old, it's going to be there. And I think a lot of it was the visuals, and I think a lot of it is just there's add-ons that I want to fly now. So as you kind of intimated, I'm more into turboprops and biz jets as far as you want to go GA. Not really big into pistons. And my philosophy on that is if I want to fly a piston, I'll just go to my local flight school and put in the time and do that personally. Like that's just my kind of, I want to fly things that I probably won't
You're gonna
ever
put in the dollars too. Be my guest.
No. And you're absolutely right. But if I want to fly something that's relatively like, I don't know if I'll ever own a TBM. Like this is a $5.5 million aircraft.
Not overly likely.
Yeah, exactly. Like, barring some unforeseen windfall of money or some trajectory change in my career or something happening crazy, there's no TBMs, there's no King Airs, there isn't going to be a Phenom 300, for Christmas waiting around the corner. So that's kind of where I like the personal GA aspect of the sim looks great. And now we're getting aircraft that they're at a degree and a fidelity where I can enjoy them because, that we kind of like that higher fidelity.
Well, let's talk about that then. So I'm going to put up an image. I know it's one of your favorites.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Oh, the Learjet. Yes, the Learjet 35 is a very, very interesting aircraft. It comes from a day when autopilots were just kind of meh. And they, as you said, and this is the fly sim where Learjet 35 Alpha, which just came out a couple months, maybe a month ago, something like that. And it was on Christmas. That's right. It was less than a month ago. I remember they released it on Christmas. And this is early access product, so there's no manuals, there's no tutorial. If you're going to get this, my suggestion is follow the tutorial for P3D version because it's pretty much identical as far as you're going to go. It's a very interesting jet because there's no auto throttle, right? So no auto throttle means you are in control of the throttle at any given time, climbing and descending, and there's no VNAV. So it's you're not really you're managing the climb, you're managing the descent, and you're managing the throttle. So there's a lot more that you're working on, and it's a change of pace versus like you press manage or you press VNAV in LNAV VNAV in the depending Boeing, Airbus, or profile nav if you're in a McDonnell Douglas product, and you just go right like that's This is a very different kind of flying, but because it only weighs like 15,000 pounds and it's got jets on it, it's just it climbs like a stabbed rat. Like that's the only way. Dude, it's insane the performance of this little thing, right? And it's fun. It's really fun to fly. And you can go and the cool thing about these jets is you can do a lot more. You can go to a lot more places you have never flown before. So instead of flying to O'Hare to Atlanta, which can get boring. You can fly to Milwaukee. You can fly to Manassas. You can fly to Aspen. All these kind of cool approaches, cool airports, things you wouldn't have experienced if you're trying to fly a 737, 747, A320, whatever, insert name here. So yeah, that's kind of where it's at.
So that brings me to, now I'm going to switch gears here just for a second.
All right.
And say, well, no, it's not just MSFS because I know this is another one that you've had a chance.
Oh man, without saying it,
about this one.
This is exactly the aircraft you think it is, but I'm not going to say it by name because I don't
Very
really
good. Don't do that.
I don't need those people in my life. But this is the AKD Sim GLF 550.
Yes,
And
I can't imagine what it is.
yeah, exactly. With those
It's a good
windows,
thing
what
you
is
can't
it?
patent. It's a good thing you can't patent a window shape.
Exactly.
That's all
Otherwise,
I'm
yeah,
saying.
yeah, exactly. And so this was an add-on that released for X-Plane 11, and the maker. It's one person. It might be a couple people who's doing texture work and stuff like that. But this is also another product that I would like to say I think is missing, which is the solid mid-tier product. This is technically not really a high fidelity aircraft, but it's just a good A to B aircraft that has such an advanced mission set where you can go in. This is actually on approach to this is on final to Jackson Hole in Wyoming. Um,
Tetons
this
is
air,
giving it away.
yeah, the Grand Tetons, right? And this aircraft has a very mission set. Um, but it's one of those things that we haven't really seen before, or this kind of aircraft, obviously. And then, honestly, these are my favorite kind of general aviation biz jets, the super mid-sized intercontinental style biz jets here, which is, you guys know what it is. You know what this
Yes.
one is.
Well, one of the ones I didn't feature on here because I think it has really been talked about, of course, is
Oh,
the
the Challenger.
Challenger
Yeah,
650 from Hot Start.
100%.
I think it's probably still the most complete add-on that anyone can buy for any plane of any a complex plane. Um,
Yeah, I
I think I'm not a
I can
pilot.
tell you that in a weird way, it's too much for me. Not in a way that, like, I just don't. I mean, I'm not. It's just.
Excuse me.
It's mainly because of the 121 item like pre-flight checklist is just the most annoying thing on the face of this planet.
It's a little
And
rough.
yeah, it's and I know I've talked to people. We know one of the beta testers really well. We actually had him on as a guest. I think week 2, Professor Crash. He's a beta tester and a little help with that operation out there. And he flew private jets, and he's very much about it. Like he's very very, and also it has something that I think I wish more add-ons had: shared cockpit, and it's native to the aircraft,
Yeah.
and that's a really good experience. But yeah, I think we need more of that, and I think a lot of people would appreciate it if we saw more Globals, more Falcons, more Gulfstreams. And I think a lot of it has to do with what I talked about. These are aircraft you're probably never going to get to experience personally, other than maybe it's at an air show and you get to walk up at one. But as
Yeah.
far as like flying in one or being a passenger, like that, this is a very very rare experience. It's very, as they say, rarefied air, and so
100%. I mean, I know a couple of people who've been in some of these planes as passengers. I've not heard a scintilla of a complaint,
yeah, exactly.
and it's not just because the plane's cool, but also because the ground experience is bar none. A private aviation ground experience is next level in terms of convenience.
It is the literal like epitome of you get what you pay for.
Yeah, no, 100%. It
Yeah,
really is, and it's wildly expensive.
sure.
But if if you have the money to burn, or you have a use case, and there's certainly plenty of businesses that have use cases.
Yeah,
It's a different thing. It makes perfect sense, particularly depending on where you are headed. Is really important in that perspective because it makes a big difference
yep.
from my view. Here's another one that's actually just come out. This is the Cockspur Phenom 100.
Yep.
Now, I'll admit, I do not know much about the Phenom series. I know our friend Raul, who kindly joined
Yes.
us recently, has a Phenom 300 in the works, and of course, there's a very popular one on X-Plane. But the reaction for this one again seems to be positive, and I think people, much like this, isn't in the same style, but much like the Vision jet's very popular. I think all of these GA jets seem to have their adherents and people who are just excited to see more interesting products coming on the GA side that appear to be, reaching for high fidelity status.
I think, and I think that's the big key too. And I think the ultimate, and we'll talk about a little more, is the working title integration. Because I think Coxper does use. I know Raoul's products use the working title, the G1000. And it's also just like think about setup and mission capability of these airplanes, right? Like you just put a flight plan in, you go. It's not really anything too complicated with these jets, and you just put it in and you go, and you can fly them single pilot. They're designed to be flown by single pilot, and I think that's a big thing that people often forget when you're flying a big airliner or even something like a Gulfstream. It requires a type rating, so that means that you have to fly it with somebody. So when you're flying it, technically you're flying it at 50% of its full potential because you're just one person doing it. Now you get into a flow and you get repeated, and if you use checklists like I do, then it doesn't become so much of a problem. But those kind of things really show themselves when, like, if you have to do a go around, for instance, like in a heavy airliner, it's kind of a pain in the butt if you're by yourself trying to do a go around because there's so many things that are going on. It's a very busy procedure in a real world plane with two pilots, much less this. And so I think these jets, there's a more accessibility. And it also means for a lot of people that they can fly from their local airport. And it also, and the way I treat the TBM, which I know we're going to show pictures of the pictures I took, I actually treat it in a vein of like I'm an owner operator. Right. So I leave it one place, and that's where it stays, and that's where I pick up the flight from and go. That's not saying that's how you have to use it, but I do see a lot of people that's how they're using those kind of planes, like especially like the Challenger, where that's kind of how Hot Start set it up, where you leave it where it was last, and then you do everything. Right. And I think a lot of people are treating it like an owner operator experience, and some of these add-ons like the M500, well, it's not the M500, it's excuse me, sorry,
the FSR 500.
It's the FSR 500.
And speaking of that,
yep, and this is the one I literally just took this yesterday. That is beautiful, downtown Miami. There's Wynwood off to the center of the picture, and obviously Miami International is below. This is one of the aircraft. I love this aircraft because of the integration with working title, and Raoul did such a good job just going to the next level with it, right? So he took the G1000 and then he made it. He basically Piper-fied it, right? He made it just so much more than what it is, and I think that it's kind of opened the door. And then the other thing, which I forgot, I should have got a picture of it, but the kind of immersive experiences that a lot of these developers are now adding into these add-ons, right? So like you could have the like the Uber Lux basically drive up to the airplane and it drops off the passengers, and there's passenger comfort things, which I think the Hot Start has a limited, kind of thing with that, and it has more FBO integration in it as well. But you're starting to see a lot of these GA add-ons that are kind of internally without the need of like a GSX or something like that, where they're creating these kind of internal immersive, just kind of really nice details, right? Like when you in the M5 or in the FSR 500, when you give them coffee, when you give them snacks, like that actually shows up on the little table in the back.
Macrons back there.
Yeah.
And, but also there's a little red carpet.
Yes,
you can put out for
yes. There's a little red carpet you can put out for your passenger, and then there's also the weight and balance part of it too, which he did a really good job
into it.
And like you can't just fit 6 people and go max range. Like these are real world considerations. Like
absolutely,
you have all those people have bags. There are weight limitations for these, and general aviation aircraft are way more sensitive because their engines aren't as powerful when it comes to weight and balance. And then, of course, you have the maintenance piece, which is the normal wear and tear. You can have engine failures and that sort of thing.
And it's not just the power issue. It's literally a balance issue.
Yes, it is a balance
issue.
It's
not just weight. There's literally a balance issue. Interestingly, that is one of the things that is actually not fully represented in, of all things, the Challenger 650. It's sort of on his agenda. I think like somewhat of the larger planes, it's not so much of a factor.
You got to put a lot of weight because there's a lot more metal.
Yeah.
You got to put a lot of weight to make it work.
Balance is not right. Balance is just not as big a factor, I guess. But
Yeah.
it's not fully implemented. It's one of
And I will
the
say
few
that
things that is not.
And I will say on real airliners, they actually have tail stakes. If it's really a big problem,
Yes.
or like we saw on a TFDI has the actual, and I didn't even know they did this, but it's got the nose weight. You literally roll it up and you just hook it up to the nose gear, and it'll hold the. Yeah, it'll hold. I mean, UPS does it, FedEx does it. I didn't know that was even a thing. But yeah, they roll little. It's literally a nose wheel weight. You roll it up, you hook it up, and it'll make sure that when you're loading it, doesn't tip over. Yeah.
I one more little shout out for our man Rahul, because this plane, this FSR 500. I mean, this is really one of the most interesting nighttime cockpit interiors anywhere.
Yeah,
it,
I would agree.
It is really something. And he did a beautiful job of it.
I love the light, like is that aquamarine? What would that color be for like the backlighting? I couldn't even tell you what that color is, but I really enjoy that color, and it's prototypical to the real one, right?
Yes.
Which is what I really love about this, is that he really went in depth as far as he could go. Because obviously this is all him, but all the Garmin stuff you see is working title.
Although he did customize some of that too.
As he said, with 1,000 different of my own customizations to it, so.
Right. And for those of you who missed Rahul, go back and watch it. It was a great interview, but I'll just also mention that you could see in the PFD, I'm sorry, in the MFD, that there's the double column for the various displays associated with system specifics that he implemented himself.
Yes.
That's not part of the working title primary set. And I gather he did some other things as well to keep it from breaking if they update it, so that he will update it when needed. But
yeah, it was very interesting. We had that conversation where he talked about he froze the code of the working title, so that and that's very good, because this is another thing that a lot of developers have kind of had to struggle with Microsoft Flight Simulator, is the updates breaking their planes. And so it's one of those things where his product's not going to really break. Yeah. At least the Garmin part of it isn't going to break if something in the sim changes. But yeah.
So one of the things I think is kind of exciting in this whole combination, though, is that the turboprops are really starting to get some work done.
In a big
way. And another one of those is the PC-12. So interestingly, with this, this is not one that I have. I've not flown this.
I have not flown it either.
But again, there was a surprising amount of excitement around this, much more than I would have thought. I know this plane's out there. I can't say I've thought a lot about it, but I was really surprised at how much discussion there is about this plane. Now, I gauge that on a couple things. For example, just people who are streaming it. There was a lot of that. Discussions on forums. Even people just asking in like the SPAD Discord, how do I configure X, Y, or Z for this plane? It's an interesting dynamic to see just how many people were excited to put this plane to the test, and it seems like it's quite popular. And again, high fidelity.
Yep. And I think it's good to see turboprops getting love, because I think that's one part of the kind of sim world that's always been lax. And I think a lot of it has to do with the engine choice, which is the PT6, which is it's a great engine. It's bulletproof, but it's orders of magnitude more difficult to make than any other kind of turbine
to simulate,
any kind of jet to simulate. Obviously, we talked about hot start. So Toto he's been kind of, he's using Lib Turbine to get the TBM 900. And I think that's kind of been his chief area of what he's been working on lately, is getting that PT, because he wants the best PT6 implementation, which is great because, like, to be honest, it's I appreciate those sorts of things because I think obviously that's what makes the turboprop the turboprop. It's the jet
Sure.
with the propeller on the front, and so you get some of the it's a more efficient, obviously, and it gives you better performance, right? And that's a lot of people like the PC12, the Pilatus, because of that. Because in the real world, the Pilatus is a let's take this into anywhere we can.
Sure.
It's basically like think of it as like the Chevy Suburban of like turboprops. It's almost ubiquitous, it's
Right.
just kind of does
It's
everything,
large
and
and in charge.
it's exactly it's large and in charge, and
Right.
it's a really capable airplane, and and a lot of people like it, and that's why. And again, it's also rated for rough fields, so like
Yeah.
you don't have to take it to a paved surface. You
Right.
can go
It's
to the wherever
right.
in that
Multiple
plane.
missions.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually, that I think that's one of the things on the turboprops kind of straddle an interesting market there, right? Because it's particularly with their single engine. You don't need a separate type rating
You
necessarily to
don't.
fly one. I mean, yes, you'd want to be IFR and all that sort of stuff, and yes, to get any insurance to actually fly one, you'd better have some training. But
Yeah.
my only point there being, it doesn't require jet certification. It's not a dual engine yet. They are they share some characteristics with the private jet market that make them much more desirable
Hmm.
from a dollars and cents perspective.
Yep.
And I think in the sim, it's interesting to me because I've been enjoying the FSR 500. I liked the Hot Start TBM 900, although honestly, when I started flying that, I was a little too early in it, a little too
Yeah.
early in my own sim adventure to be really good enough at flying to fly that plane, especially the way Toto does stuff, where it's just so damn realistic. So now, when I look at these, it's kind of interesting to me because, on the one hand, it's not exactly, they aren't really hand fly aircraft, but they fly very nicely.
They do. They
Right.
do.
And I especially love the way it's done for the FSR 500. I found it very hand flying friendly,
When you're not on the
particularly on
ground.
landing. It's
But yeah,
wonderful.
on
Yeah.
landing, it's very. I actually, I did a pretty nice landing at Key West yesterday. Very,
Yesterday,
very.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was very, very greasy, but the ground handling's terrible. I'll just go ahead and Raul will admit that, and guess what? Every other Microsoft Flight Simulator developer will also admit the ground handling needs. That's the one thing where X-Plane and definitely. I was just talking to somebody. X-Plane is one of those things, and we talk about X-Plane 12. X-Plane's one of those things where it's like um, you have the operating of the aircraft is really good. They fly great. The ground
Yeah.
handling's great. All the systems are usually pretty well done for the add-ons. It's just that everything else about that particular platform makes it not really desirable to want to use, and that's why I think like the GA community also flocks to Microsoft Flight Simulators. There's a bigger ease of use, and obviously, there's a lot more developers that are actively working on this, and there's a lot more things that are being implemented for add-ons
Yeah.
in this sim as well.
There are some complaints, obviously, with Microsoft Flight Simulator in terms of whether it's, some of the navigational things not working exactly the way
Yeah,
they work in the real world, or the ground handling piece. There are some bits and bobs of that, but as you and I have discussed, uh, the GA community, particularly a group of people who, many of whom are flying in the real world, who are on, for example, Pilot Edge. There's a lot of X-Plane users, but I'm seeing more and more people who are MSFS users.
yeah.
So I think we are seeing some transition there.
I think we're just getting a point where we can have a good sim that looks great. I
Right,
don't think we
especially
have to
for
make a
VF,
compromise. We don't have to make a compromise anymore.
right, especially for VFR flying, where
Yes.
being able to actually see the things that you need to see is very important.
Yep.
But on the turboprop front, so Microsoft Flight Simulator did something that probably surprised people maybe when it came out, was that they put a TBM 930 in it.
Yes.
Is it a high fidelity TBM 930? No, but they put one in. They made an effort at it. Somebody thought, at least for a hot minute, about what the turboprop engine was doing or whatever.
Yep.
And one of the companies that has really taken advantage of the default aircraft and done a lot to sort of rejigger them for either steam gauge operation or more realistic operation of the existing setup is Black Square.
Yes.
And so one of the items they have is a TBM 850.
Yes.
And now I do not have the TBM 850. I will say that this is another add-on in the turboprop category where there was a shocking amount of interest to me.
Yep.
Shocking amount of interest, and maybe it's because of guys like Stevia or whatever.
November
I'm not going to
851
complain.
Tango Bravo.
Right, I'm not going to complain. But I think there's a lot of people who, as you say, okay, I probably never own a TBM, but I'd love to be able to fly one in the sim. And even if and I would bet there's people who are flying GA real life who are flying, Cessnas and Pipers and these planes
Yep.
who would kill to get in and fly TBM.
Yes.
And, here it is. And once again, this is another example where you can see there's a massive amount of work that's gone into this plane. All of the things that I've read about it, watched about it, very impressive. And one developer. This is one guy. Black Square is one guy.
One guy.
One guy, just like Raul. That's.
I think that's another thing we're seeing is I think there's enough with what Work and Title has done, with what TDS has done, what PMS have done, and I don't know, is the TDS free or do you have to pay for that?
No, you pay for
that. Oh, so the PMS is free if you don't care about having sim brief uplink and some other little bits and bobs.
Well, the TDS is different in that it is the Garmin trainer.
Yeah. Okay.
Just integrate. So it's the actual Garmin. It's fidelity wise, that's high fidelity.
So I might need to get I might need to get that. So anyway,
but it does not have like Navigraph integration because it's the Garmin trainer.
Well,
right. So there's no right.
I don't know.
It's a different setup.
Anyway,
it has
so
charts and it's up and the nav database is updated like once a year or something like that. But it for a lot of the VFR, IFR stuff, it doesn't change that much. Well, particularly for VFR, it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
For IFR, it's not going to matter. But anyway, just as a side note, that's a paid item, but it's very, very good.
So I think one of the things we wanted to talk about was mainly, we've kind of hinted around about Working Title and what they're doing and what they've done with taking the default Garmin. And I think they work on all the avionics, don't they? They work on the 787 as well, like for the default.
Oh, yes.
So they work on all the avionics. But specifically for GA, what they've done with the G1000, what they're doing with the G3000, and various other
530,
the
430,
430, all the Garmin, which are pretty much ubiquitous these days as far as navigational aids go in general aviation. It's allowed these developers to kind of not have to worry about the avionics piece as heavy. So, for instance, Raul doesn't have to create an entire G1000. He just has to make it where it's realistic for what you would see if you owned a Piper M500, right? Like that's what we're talking about. So it's easing a lot of the workload of these, where these single developers, you have somebody, Black Square, one guy, Raul, one guy, where you have these individuals that are going to have the ability to not have to worry as much about the avionics piece. And they're also, it's going to be updated. So now, of course, that's kind of another thing, but that's one less thing. Instead of like, oh, I've got to make it, then I've got to make sure that it works in the sim. It's like, well, I just need to make sure I need to do what I need to do. And whenever they update it, I just have to check it to make sure that it's still doing what it's advertised to do. And I think that's super important because it lets the add-on workers focus on other things like flight model, like depth of systems and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Because especially in these aircraft that are smaller, the electrical system piece is so important because you are not, like I know that like the default for a lot of these things is to hook up to the GPU, but I'm just like, dude, this is just, like for me, realism wise, knowing how much running a GPU is at like
Yeah.
an FBO, like nobody's doing that. It's all
No,
battery starts.
you turn that plane, you turn that battery on, you get that thing started up in 5 minutes, or
Yeah,
you're out of luck.
exactly. Yeah, or yeah, exactly. Or you're out of luck, and that's what a lot of like that's where the electrical part of this is really important. And so, not having to worry about coding an avionic piece, making sure it has all the integrations that you want,
Right.
and then having to worry about the electrical, it frees up a lot of space. So I think that that's really kind of a big game changer has been the default working title integrations in these aircraft that allow these developers to make something that's high fidelity, but not necessarily have to worry 100% about avionics and implementation in the
And
sim.
I think, and to me, one of the things that strikes me so much about what Working Title has done is that they have done something here that nobody has done in a sim till now. Uh, X-Plane has a basic Garmin package, but it's not in any way, shape, or form up to the level of of Working Title.
Yeah.
Working Title has largely implemented what exists in the Garmin systems, at least the core systems, right? And for
Yes.
the avionics packages that they've worked on, like the 1000, the 530, the 430, the 3000. And I'm not 100% sure the 5000 has been updated as much, but it's really only in the longitude that
Yeah.
I'm aware of. And I think that one of the things that strikes me about this, I'm not exactly sure how they work together at this point or what's going to happen, but the other day when Cirrus announced the SR22 Gen 7 real world, update
Yeah.
for their, and that includes a significant change in their avionics package. It's still Garmin, but a significant change in how it's set up. Real Sim Gear, who makes an SR22 cockpit product that you can buy for yourself or or a flight school, announced that they too are going to have a G7 version, Gen 7 version. And one of the things that it actually mentioned was that at least for now, it's Microsoft Flight Simulator only.
Huh.
Now, of course, it's not going to be out for a little bit because there isn't even one in the sim, a plane yet in the
Mm-hmm.
sim that matches up. But that was one of the things they said, and I sort of wondered, well, is that because they can count on the quality of the working title underpinnings to
Yeah.
make it work? And I would guess the answer is probably yes. And which is interesting to me because Real Sim Gear actually made its own sim plane too, but they only put that a DA40, but they only put that in X plane where that's been their traditional base
Yeah.
of users, and I sort of wondered if that's a piece. So, for those who still like to make the claim, although we don't hear it as much so often, MSFS just a game, it's just for kids, it's not real, blah, blah, not a real sim, blah blah
Yeah.
blah blah blah. Working Title has put them in a position where uh, they have far outstripped their competitors on these on a key avionics piece, and I think that that is worth notice from the community, and I hope folks are paying attention. And indeed, I'll point out here. I'm just put this up. This is from the Just Flight Piper Arrow 3 series, and you can see here they've got the 530 and the 430, and
Yeah.
that's right out of Working Title, and it works. So
I mean, that's really, I mean, I think that's kind of the party piece, like that. That's kind of like the not the party piece, but it is kind of MSFS's party piece, if you will. But it's more so that's kind of the big theme we're seeing these days is that, like I said, these add-on makers aren't going to have to worry so much about avionics integration unless you're doing steam gauges, in which case you have to make sure the system is working properly so that it's simulated properly.
right.
But as far as like electronic, anything Garmin related, you're not really having to worry about that. And I think it's just going to open the floodgates for more people. This is, I think you said this was
This
the
is the
Baron.
Baron.
Yeah.
This is the black square Baron again, a steam gauge adaptation of the Baron that's in Microsoft Flight Simulator that's using the G1000,
Yes.
and they've done it as a steam gauge. And this is another example of some of the great options that we have. Again, there's a working title underpinning here, but look at what else you can do.
Yep.
With this sim, and of course, everything looks great, blah 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 blah. But there's really an amazing group of options that are in the sim now, coming to the sim,
Yes.
that are taking either existing sim products or new sim products. I think you can't talk about any of these, and I somehow I managed not to put a picture in here for this one. But you can't talk about any of these, of course, without talking about one developer who has done something, I think, that everyone has sort of been waiting for in the sim, which is A2A.
Yes.
So A2A has put out the Comanche, and in doing that, they've also put out their MSFS version of their AccuSim, which they cleverly called AccuSim 2.0. But the point there being
Great
that,
branding.
right, exactly. A lot of suggestions were made to them. By the way, they actually asked for suggestions on the name. They said, we're just going to call it AccuSim 2.0. But I think the truth of that is
Yeah.
that you've got an add-on that takes full advantage of what Microsoft Flight Simulator offers. So, for example, if you're using the 530 set in there, which you
Sure.
can, you're getting the working title piece. But the flight model is, separately developed.
Yeah, and I think it's external as well, and I think it's.
So I think they've tried to make it now where it's all, I don't know, somehow the programming is set up now where it's not external in the sense that like you have to have a whole separate application running.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's effectively external.
Yeah.
They actually had the sounds external for a little bit, but they reintegrated those so they could put this thing in marketplace, which is also kind of impressive. But I think without question, I think everyone who has touched that plane has come away amazed at what they have done. Yes, it's a simpler GA plane, but that puts, in my mind, all the more focus and emphasis on how it flies.
I think, yeah, because obviously, like you and I know you have a little experience with this real world, and you've done a lot of the Piper flying, and you've talked about how primitive these cockpits are. Like they're like and what I mean is the autopilot, not necessarily a cockpit. Standard 6-pack that's pretty ubiquitous in aviation. It's just how that information is laid out these days, whether it's a primary flight display. It all goes back to the 6-pack, right? And so, no, I think you're right. I think you have to have something that flies well, because you don't, like, you fly that and you really put the autopilot on to like ease kind of like your fatigue factor if you're doing a cross country. That's literally what it's for. It's not for
a little workload here or there.
Yeah, exactly, or a little workload, whatever you're doing, right? And so I think you're right. The flight model is important. And I think we're going to see a lot more people. But here's what I'll say. Maybe this is one of those kind of proof of concept things, because A2A has some other amazing add-ons. The one I would love to see, and again, A2A, I'm throwing money right at it. I'll take my wallet. They're Connie. Their Lockheed Constellation. I would, that thing in P3D was fantastic. There aren't a lot of add-ons that are better than that. In my opinion, it's certainly better than the PMDG GC6. Don't kill me, Randazzo, but I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you. Yeah, I'm just gonna. Yeah, the DC6, the DC6 bought the Falcon, right? So it's all good.
Yeah,
he's good. But no, it's that I would love their Connie, and maybe that's what I'm thinking, because I think also, if I remember correctly, they had an AccuSim B17. Don't quote me. I swear A2A had a B17 as well, and that's another thing that like I would love to have something like that, even though it's an older warbird, but it's really cool. And I think like we're going to open the door. Maybe they make a Baron, or whatever, right? A Seneca, whatever, but it's going to open the door for them to make something that's a little bit more complex.
So I don't know if they had. I know they had the Connie, but I don't know if
Yeah.
that was an AccuSim one.
It was a different product, but it was high fidelity.
Okay.
It wasn't AccuSim, but it was a high fidelity product.
So
Uh,
what I do know is that they have said that they're working on 2 planes at the moment. They haven't
yeah.
said what they are. My working assumption is one of them's the 172.
Oh yeah, for sure. The
Yeah.
172 is their like bread and butter
Right.
product.
And again, when they put it out, I'll buy it.
Yeah,
I may not even
imagine.
fly it that much, but I know I'll buy it.
But let's talk about the training piece of having something like an AccuSim in a sim that looks as good as Microsoft Flight Simulator
Yep.
looks for something like a Pilot Edge, which is used, as you said, by several real world pilots
A lot of them, yeah.
who want a little bit more of a more immersive real world experience for training purposes. So
Absolutely. And
now we're getting to a point where we may start seeing a shift where, like you said, like people are like, oh, this is Xbox kids. We hear that all the time. We joke about it. We're like, oh, the Xbox kids.
right.
I don't think it's a lot of kids, to be honest. I agree with you there. I think it's a lot of adults who are like, oh, this flight sim thing. And then, as Raul intimated, Xbox only takes you so far, and you're like, well, I'm going to buy a PC because I really want to get into this
Yep.
hobby. And that's
Yep.
only good for the hobby. Just not to go on an Xbox. Why is Xbox good for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 or 2024 and beyond? But
It's
just know that it is. It brings more
yeah.
to the market, and we can have more planes like the A2A that
That's right.
I didn't even know. You literally just I didn't even know it was on Xbox. That's amazing. Like
No,
to
it's
be,
not. It's not. It's
it's
in the
not.
marketplace.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
it's
It's
in the
not an
marketplace.
Xbox.
That's fine.
It's in the
Okay, yeah.
marketplace.
So
But
that's
yeah.
different. But because
But
I was going to be
I
like,
think they've
whoa.
expressed some interest in trying to figure out how to get there, but it's not yet in Xbox.
Okay,
But I
so
think they've
thank you
expressed
for
some interest.
clarifying that.
So
But
so but what I would say, because we've
yeah,
coming up in our hour here, but
yep,
what I would add to that in terms of the A2A situation is the training elements there. You talk about a 172. Well, thousands of people train on 172s. The more realistic you can get, the more you might want to use it in a sim to
mm-hmm,
familiarize yourself with all the issues you might run into. It. No, a sim will never replace time in the cockpit exactly, but I look over at X-Plane, for example, and the Airfoil Labs, who makes a 172 digital and
yeah.
a 172 analog. They're fairly popular. I think the digital was particularly popular. The analog just came out recently. I don't know if it's as popular. Why? I think it's, you ask me, I would tell you it's MSFS. But
I
that's the
mean,
difference between now and then. And we know that the 172 was a major product for A2A and P3D.
yeah.
And I have every reason to expect that it will be massive in
Oh
Microsoft
yeah,
Flight Simulator, despite the grousing that you see from people like it's boring. Well, that doesn't matter. For for people who are training, there's always a new group of people who are training, and probably many of them are spending at least a little time in the simulator, uh, Microsoft Flight Simulator or some other home sim product to stay current on procedures, to work on emergencies. It's a great way to do that.
yeah. All
So
all the training, none of the risk, right? Like
right, I mean,
there's
what
a
do we
reason
do?
why airline pilots train in full flight simulators now. It has
Right,
not, you know, instead of training at a night at some random airport out in California that you've never heard of, doing laps.
correct,
you
correct.
know,
I mean, yeah, and especially on emergencies. I'll say that, and I mentioned this early on, that I spent a lot of time working on this VATSIM P1 thing. And
yeah,
even though you'll never use 99% of it on VATSIM, we did, engine out after takeoff, and we did, forced landings from different, when you're higher up and you're trying to pick out a spot. We did, um, stalls, and we did, steep turns and all those sorts of things that you do to avoid dying in a plane.
yeah.
And
and
so,
that's really what they're for. Just
that's
to,
what they're for.
yeah,
You have
don't,
no reason to do a steep turn other to avoid traffic.
yeah.
You don't need to do a 45-degree turn under any other circumstances.
I don't
Uh,
think the passengers would appreciate that either.
No, and you won't either as the
No,
pilot.
yeah,
It's not going to feel that good either.
yeah.
So the G forces are still the G forces,
Hmm.
and and so there's no reason not to do these things. And that's actually something you can do on Pilot Edge. You really can't do on Bad Sim. Is
Sure.
you could also do the emergency calls and things like that if you need to.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you won't need to.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, now we didn't get to every single GA situation here. We haven't mentioned that there are some very nice twins out there. There's the 310. There's the 414. I know,
14. Yeah.
yeah, which are very nice. And we did mention briefly the Baron. There's also now just announced this week. There's DA42 that's on its way to the market, and I think it's just another indication of the popularity of GA in Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Yep. I think we're coming to a point where it is like it's going to be extremely popular, and I think we're getting to a point with AccuSim products and working title integration and stuff like that, where we're going to start seeing this as a training thing, right?
Yeah.
Go to your local airport. It looks just like it does, and you go there and you fly around, and now you can actually point out landmarks, right? Because like that's a big
Yes.
thing when you're doing your private pilot's license, or you're doing your cross country instrument rating, anything like that. You're pointing out landmarks, right? Because sometimes the sim is perfect, unless you set the failures up or the add-on has random failures, it's not going to fail unless you do something wrong. But in the real world, things fail all the time, so you got to know, like, oh, hey, where am I, right? Because if your gyro compass or your navigation fails, alternator generator fail, whatever,
Right.
you got to figure it out, and you got to know where you are, right?
Yeah.
So
where am I going to put down?
Yeah, exactly. Where am I going to put it down? Or
right. And in fact, we saw that just on the commercial side in I think it was a caravan the other day, taking off from Dulles Airport, had an engine failure just after takeoff and landed on Loudoun County Parkway, just outside the border of the airport. And I saw a little breakdown of that. It was must have been quite a professional landing, because they had power lines and street lights and all kinds of stuff that they successfully navigated. But what does it come back to? What have you learned?
Yeah.
What have you learned? And then that actual video mentioned these are kind of entry level jobs for pilots. You know what they've learned? If you were doing these things, you've learned a lot. Could you have practiced not that specific landing, but the notion of how to tackle these things in a short amount of time and make good decisions? Simulators are where all of that is.
Yeah.
And yeah, Microsoft Flight Simulator is not an FAA approved simulator or whatever. But that's not the point. The point is, you can't get hours for it, but you can certainly get knowledge.
Yeah, and you know how many pilots during COVID were using whatever home simulator to be current on procedures while they were furloughed? A lot of them.
A lot. Some of them became well-known streamers during COVID just because of that.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, we've run over a bit, but
yes, we have.
It was a fun conversation.
It was a great conversation, as always.
And thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you, guys. Yep.
And perhaps we don't usually say this, but maybe I'll mention this. If you're enjoying the channel, subscribe. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up. Because, and I say primarily because we hope you'll all tune in and join in the conversation.
Exactly. Yes.
Most importantly. So let us know if you have any feedback as well. And as you can see, our Discord handles are up here now on our names. Basically, you can find us all over and come talk to us if you like.
Yes, please.
Thanks, everybody.
Alrighty, thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Felix.